Hey, it's now my pleasure to introduce my old friend from the Department of Justice days, who was the ex-CIO for FBI and was indispensable in getting the summit organized. My friend Gordon Bitko, Senior Vice President of Public Sector Policy at the Information Technology Industry Council. Gordon, over to you.
Thanks, Tom, and good morning to everybody who's joining us today. As Tom noted, I am Senior Vice President for Public Sector Policy at ITI, the Information Technology Industry Council. It's a privilege to be able to co-sponsor this event with GSA, and it really fits perfectly with our mission at ITI. As the premier technology policy trade association, we work on behalf of the world's leading IT companies to promote innovation and growth. ITI believes it's essential for government and industry to partner to develop and implement policies that ensure the government has timely access to the best available technologies. Exponential growth in data and the demand for services, the pandemic, and continuous cybersecurity threats make it more critical than ever that government and industry work together to deliver and manage technology services that support the needs of and provide benefit to individuals, organizations, and government at all levels. More than ever, delivery of those services depends on ensuring that the government runs on reliable and secure data center operations. The ambitious goals of Executive Order 14057, such as net zero carbon electricity production and net zero emissions from federal procurement, mean those data centers must also be resilient and sustainable. Over the next 2 days, you'll hear from leaders across government and industry as we start the conversation about what government can and must do to achieve those sustainability objectives. It's a great first step that GSA recognizes that these ambitious goals, layered on top of an already complex operating environment, can only be achieved through the collective efforts of those in the public and private sectors. And so I'd like to recognize and thank Tom and the whole GSA team for working with ITI and planning this event and ensuring that leaders from government and industry have a chance to work together in addressing these challenges. To kick us off today, I'd like to introduce our opening speaker, Krystal Brumfield. Currently, Ms. Brumfield is Associate Administrator for the Office of Government-Wide Policy. She's also the Chief Acquisition Officer at GSA and Co-Chair of the Federal CAO Council. Before assuming this role, Krystal has had a distinguished career in both government and industry, serving as counsel to the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Chief Operating Officer for the D.C. Chamber of Commerce, President of the Airport Minority Advisory Council, and Chief of Staff for the Carlisle Airport Group. It's a privilege to have her here today to start us off. Krystal, over to you.
Thank you, Gordon, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to invite you to the 2022 Data Center Sustainability Summit. As Gordon mentioned, I'm the Associate Administrator for the Office of Government-Wide Policy at GSA. GSA and OGP specifically is home to the Data Center and Cloud Optimization Initiative. Since 2016, our team has served as the managing partner to OMB for the Data Center Optimization Initiative, also known as DCIO. DCIO is the latest in the series of efforts that we have going towards for over 10 years to optimize and consolidate thousands of federally owned data centers, ranging from small server closets to large standalone facilities. We've made tremendous progress during this time period, achieving billions of dollars in data center related cost savings and closing thousands of facilities. You may have seen that the government achieved an enormous success at the beginning of this year when the first ever, all 24 CFO Act agencies received an A grade in the DCIO component of the latest FATARA scorecard. So I wish we could be gathering in person today to celebrate this accomplishment, but I'm pleased to know that I applaud every single agency for all of the years of the hard work that went through to achieving these grades. Congratulations to all of the agencies. So why is this summit important? Some of you might remember that the last summit that we hosted, it was on Cloud and Infrastructure Summit hosted back in October 2019, which was just a few months before everything shut down due to the COVID pandemic. And we saw that at that moment firsthand how critical cloud and IT infrastructure and the smooth functioning of our government services really are. We saw it firsthand and we couldn't avoid it. So just in 2 short, and some may say seemingly endless years, since this last summit, we've seen federal agencies make a lot of progress with consolidating the data centers, moving to cloud, as well as leveraging the commercial services and otherwise modernizing their IT infrastructure. These efforts have made it easier for agencies to achieve their missions and serve the American people, and that now makes it possible to better incorporate data center optimization and other important government priorities, such as sustainability, which we're here to hear a lot about today. So I don't want to get ahead of the other panelists, but what I do want to say is that we've made a numerous potential that the federal data center portfolio has played a significant role in helping the United States achieve the sustainability goals that have been set out for it by the Biden administration. By making some purposeful changes, we, as well as some hard decisions, have been able to change data centers that are owned and operated as federal agencies. We can help federal government make a leap forward into the transition to clean, zero emission, and renewable technologies. Today, you're going to hear about some truly impressive technology innovations happening in data centers over the next 2 days. I ask you to keep in mind the not only direct impact that these innovations can make on the federal data centers themselves, but also on the broader impact that they can have on our country's sustainability efforts as we respond to the climate crisis, as well as other challenges that we must grapple with as we strive to deliver the best possible services to the American people. So, for example, our nation is facing an antiquated critical infrastructure issue, such as with planes, with trains and roads, and in addition to our water, sewer, energy consumption around infrastructure. Today, we're talking about leveraging the public and private sector ingenuity, which is critical to modernization and transformation of every sector that underpins humanity. By investing in people through the workforce, processes, and workflows, and technologies such as cloud, artificial intelligence, and data analytics, these achievements are paramount. These investments are essential for us to find the right balance of the many challenges that exist, and that the data center roadmap of the future has to be contemplated. So for today, these next few days, we have a great lineup of speakers from government, industry, academia, all addressing various facets of sustainability and energy as it relates to data centers and cloud. But later this morning, you're going to hear from a panel of CIOs who are going to discuss how they are addressing sustainable IT and modernization within their own agencies. And other panel topics on today's agenda will include securing climate resilient national infrastructure, agency DCIO and cloud adoption success stories, and the combination of technology that is being used to power state-of-the-art supercomputers in the most modern day centers today. We're also going to hear a fireside chat that we're calling TED Talks, where we've teamed up with government leaders from prominent industry figures to talk about how private sector sustainability efforts can help the federal government. And then finally, we'll end the day by a closing keynote speech from Mr. Scott Foster, the Director of Sustainable Energy Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And that's only just day one. As I mentioned, we're going to have 2 days of packed information from amazing speakers, and we can't wait to begin. But for now, I have the honor of introducing today's opening keynote speaker, our very own Kevin Kampschroer. I can't think of a more perfect person to start off the summit today than Kevin. Kevin is GSA's Chief Sustainability Officer, as well as the Federal Director of the Office of Federal High Performance Green Buildings within GSA's OGP. Kevin is a dedicated public servant. His career spans many years of making the federal buildings more green and sustainable. And just a few lights from his career includes creating a framework for which GSA responds to the challenges of climate change, greenhouse gas emission reductions, and the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act's mandate to move GSA's federal building inventory towards high-performance green buildings. I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage, Mr. Kevin Kampschroer. Kevin.
Well, good morning. I think I'm on audio. And the co-host has asked me to start my video, and my video says the co-host has closed my video, so I can't start it. So it's up to you guys. Anyway, I thought I would start out with a story about how I am not an IT professional. And there we go. But I do know a little something about IT. And it's always dangerous when somebody comes to a conference of experts and really, really smart people and says, I know a little something about your topic. I got thrown into information technology back right at the end of the last century, when I had just finished being the project manager for the largest federal building ever constructed since the Pentagon, the Ronald Reagan Federal Building and International Trade Center. And we had a weird problem with IT within the Public Building Service of GSA. And the problem was project management. And that was at a time when project management, as it is today, was not really well incorporated into IT large project discussions. So I got into, you manage the project, we'll teach you about IT. So I learned a lot about IT in a very, very short amount of time. And I appreciate, as a result of that experience, just how much all of you are doing in ways that most of us really don't appreciate and can't understand. Databases, data centers, the size and magnitude of what's going on is almost unimaginable. Data centers in the United States consume 70,000 gigawatt hours of electricity. And we'll compare that with the entire federal government. Every bit of electricity the entire federal government uses for anything is 54 gigawatt hours. 25% of the data centers of the world are in the United States, and many of them are leading the way in showing how this can be done and how the ambitious goals that the president has laid out for us can be achieved. I also want to tell a little story about Workplace 2020, which started in the early part of this century in GSA, and it was a project that I led to figure out how it was that we could make better workspaces for the federal workers, improve their productivity, and make the case for spending more money on space. And what we discovered when we really looked at it, that every single time, and we did more than 20 pilot projects before running this program full time, every time we ended up spending less money than the budget because people didn't really need more of anything. They needed better of what they needed it designed for what they were doing. So we used less space, got better productivity, and it influenced the programs of Freeze the Footprint. When Freeze the Footprint started in the federal government, everybody said it's impossible, and then it happened. Then it was Reduce the Footprint, and somebody at OMB set an ambitious goal of 3 million square feet, and this, no, that'll never happen, and it was more than 3 million square feet. So right now we're working at GSA on Workplace 2030 and right-size the footprint, so we start understanding and really using the lessons of the last couple of years in the pandemic. And the lessons of the pandemic for me were that all of you are the heroes of the federal government, because I and all of my colleagues were able to move seamlessly in GSA in particular to working remotely, working from anywhere, anytime, and just, it was really, truly seamless. It just, like, one day we didn't go into the office, and 3 years later, I'm not sure we miss the office all that much. We miss other people. And I think that's the missing component in all of this that we'll have to figure out. And there's some parallels that we can bring to data centers as well. There are many, many stories, and telling data center expert stories about data centers almost seems like bringing coals to Newcastle, but most companies, when they move to cloud computing or service computing, just as GSA did, drastic reductions in the amount of data center consumption that there is. We have found that data centers can shrink by large percentages just by all of the modern techniques of server optimization and so on. I read one statistic from about 8 years ago that has changed significantly, that in the United States, the average server was working at approximately 15% of its total capacity. And the more we can use the resources effectively, the better we are. And we've got private sector companies that are showing that the ambitious goals of the executive orders that the president has laid out are actually achievable. Google is committed by 2030 to be 24/7 carbon pollution free electricity in all its centers. Microsoft says they'll be carbon negative by 2030. The executive order says we will have 100% carbon pollution free energy, electricity and energy in all federal buildings by 2030. And we will be matching it 24/7 by 2035. And the matching is really interesting too, because it's fairly easy to be carbon neutral if you don't care about the time of day. But if you do care about the time of day, and the grid does care about the time of day, it makes a huge difference. And then the entire federal portfolio is committed to be net zero by 2045. And I just would like to remind you that that's the federal building portfolio, and most data centers are in buildings. And it's sort of interesting to hear people talk about the cloud and forget that the cloud is a metaphor. There's actually not, some sort of magic flying data center that's up there in the ether. But we've got opportunities. We were working on a very small data center project in the Edith Green Wendell Wyatt building, and 6 different agencies all had data centers in one building. Now, these are not real data centers. These are small server rooms, but let's use the analogy anyway. It took 1 year of negotiation to agree on the temperature that the data center had to be, because everybody had different standards. It took that same year to agree that actually we could have all of the computers in one room, and thus obviously save a huge amount of money on air conditioning and so on. So the ability and the willingness to think about sharing and think about sharing services and people it's hugely important, I think, for the federal government to move forward. And just one example, right now, the Department of Homeland Security is proposing that agencies can share SCIFs, unheard of before the pandemic. Realize that this is a resource that costs a lot of money that is not used a lot. So if we could have multiple agencies using it, and the same thing goes for probably data centers and servers. And I think we should be able to figure out how to share those so that we can maximize the consumption of resources. I think it's also, we talk a lot about energy consumption. It's worth remembering too that it's just not energy consumption, it's water consumption. The typical data center uses as much water as a city of 30,000 people. And that's a huge impact, especially if you look at where data centers are moving and how many data centers are in the rest. And I read just in preparing for this about a very interesting new technology where we're using fluorocarbons to cool or to dissipate the energy, because it's a phase change material. The phase change is different than, certainly different than water. apparently it's hugely valuable because it can reduce the water consumption by 95%, which is pretty stunning. At the same time, if we start looking at the entire world of sustainability and in the environment, fluorocarbons are not really great materials to be creating and having around. And are we really looking at how much water did it take to create those fluorocarbons that are doing such a good job avoiding the further consumption of water there? I think most people don't understand how much water goes just into air conditioning. In the United States, 50% of potable water is actually used for air conditioning and is evaporated and not actually consumed by anybody. That's a huge drain on what is becoming a more and more valuable resource. So I just want to conclude with a sort of a call that this isn't something that is a nice to have. It's not something that is it's something that is nice to have, but it's not only that. And it's something that is good to achieve, but it's not only that. It's actually imperative for all of us. The latest United Nations report is just shocking because it says, we are on the cusp of within a couple of years, if we don't reduce energy consumption to the Paris Accord levels, the ability of the world to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees is maybe at huge risk. And every single country is behind on their goals. So the one good thing is that a lot of what we deal with in buildings is people. People are notoriously difficult to control. They have their own individual quirks, needs, and so on. At least, and I think this is the only lighthearted comment I'll make, the nice thing is servers don't argue back. They do exactly what you tell them. So tell them to do good things, tell them to maximize their output, tell them to consolidate, and please continue with all of the stunning work that you are collectively doing for the viability, the resilience of the federal government, and ultimately for the resilience of our planet, our home. Thank you very much. And I hope this conference is really superb. And I can't imagine with the lineup that you've got in front of you, it won't be. Thank you.